And one of the things is age discrimination. Originally, we put in a law that said that it would apply at age 65, and then magically we raised it to age 70, and then we took the limit off. For managers, the significance of this is you can no longer rely on people to be retired, because there's no mandatory retirement, with a few select exceptions. Commercial airline pilots can be retired out of the driver's seat at 60. That doesn't mean you can fire them. It just means that they can move to being navigator or something else on the ship, on the airship, but they cannot continue to be the pilot under the rules. Also, there's rules for law enforcement and some other agencies like that.
And then you switch it to a different training program, that's something there's salary.
And that's not, the question is whether you have to keep their salary the same. I would say that's certainly debatable. If they're not worth the same amount of money, you can offer them what's appropriate for the job they go into. Frankly, the pilots used to do very, very well, but with the multiple Chapter 11s in the major airline industry, pilot salaries are not as lucrative as they used to be, because it used to be they just get to that age and they retire and go live in Florida.
But I'm sure that their salaries are still above other.
Oh yeah, the pilots are well compensated. Yes, they are. Yeah.
So I was just wondering if their salaries have.
No. If they move from the pilot seat to the navigator seat, they definitely can be paid as the navigator's pay if they're willing to do that and if they're qualified.
Not the same time.
Would that be
Right.
like age discrimination?
No, it's not age discrimination if it's based on a rational characteristic, like that's what the job pays. So if the navigators are all making, $120,000 a year and you pay them $100,000 a year, that's age discrimination. But if you say 120 is the going rate, instead of paying 180 as a pilot, we'll pay you 120 as a navigator, you give them the choice. And I have had that issue, particularly people with disabilities, where they can no longer perform their regular job. You can offer them another position, but you do not have to keep the pay the same if the alternative job pays less. For the same reason, you can't discriminate against them, but you can pay what you can establish as the going rate for that job, for sure. Yes, sir?
What about military?
Military exempt. Military can pretty much do whatever they want to do, subject to Department of Defense regulations and presidential proclamations and stuff like that. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, this is definitely a private sector issue. But keep in mind, it affects nonprofits as well as for-profits. About the only non-government sector that is an exception is for actual churches and religious institutions. Like, we're not required here at the University of St. Thomas to have a person who's not a Catholic teach the Catholic theology courses. But within reason, nor are we required to have a non-priest work at the chapel for obvious reasons. But subject to that, if you're hiring people here to teach history, you cannot say we only hire Catholics to teach history. Now, that's been tried by some religiously affiliated universities, but the risk that they run is that they'll lose federal loan money. Federal loan money is very, very important to most institutions of higher education. So because of that, most of them play by the rules. Good question, though. So, religious discrimination, generally was pretty quiet. Mostly we dealt with 24-hour shift work. After 9/11, there were a lot of issues of discrimination based on religion. So this area became a hotter area. That seems to have sorted out today. But one of the areas that we see is religious garb. So if a person belongs to a religion where they dress a certain way, or have certain jewelry or things that are affiliated with that or associated with that religion, then they can certainly do that. Some religions, people don't shave or do other things, so within reason, employers are expected to accommodate that. So it's a pretty interesting area. Where we get into it is, and get called as a consultant, is when we have issues of people that are in the public contact area, whether they can do certain things or require certain attire because they're in the public contact. And usually the answer is they cannot. The fact that someone's in public contact, as long as it's consistent with their religion, you can't discriminate against them by prohibiting them from being in public contact. So it's pretty interesting. Here in Houston, where you might see this is the Ranch 99 Asian food store. You'll see a lot of people in traditional, different garb working at the checkout counters. So, you know, it's the only place in town where I've consistently gone where I run into people saying, yep, these people are accommodated. It doesn't seem to cause any problems. So it's a pretty interesting situation. Disabilities, let me bring back one slide. Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, passed in 1990. The last major area of basically discrimination protection went into effect in 1992 through 1994. It is the most significant area that we encounter today as management, and it is difficult to comply with it because a lot of different things can be disability, and it's not just disabled, it's perceived as disabled, and it can influence the family members of someone with a disability. Also, remember, it ties in with the Family Medical Leave Act. If someone uses the Family Medical Leave Act, you cannot discriminate against them for using the act if they need to have time off due to getting medical treatment and stuff like that. So again, my experience is the majority of employers do the right thing and want to take care of employees and show compassion. Usually the clients I deal with, they're more compassionate than the law requires. And sometimes it gets them into legal trouble because they go beyond what's legally required, and then they end up kind of in never land where it's not clear where they legally stand. But generally speaking, I think most employers are sensitive to making sure that employees are treated well, and that's the best approach. National origin is closely related to race discrimination, but of course it is not the same, and persons are protected based on national origin or country of origin and stuff like that. This is an area we don't get a lot of complaints in this area, but it's certainly out there. But you know, we may see more complaints in the future. Veterans are protected, generally speaking, if people have time off from work. Go to military service, get called up to go to Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that, then they're protected, and they're protected in terms of returning back to work. If there were any automatic raises while they're gone, they're eligible to get those, and things like that. So they do get significant protections. Government contractors are required to have an affirmative action plan for veterans. So that's, and disabled veterans. So that's a little bit different. Again, that's specific to government contractors. We talked about GINA a few minutes ago. That's a little bit of information on that law. Now, the most common complaint today in employment discrimination is retaliation. And oddly enough, a person can lose their underlying claim of sexual harassment or racial harassment and win on retaliation, which makes no sense to me, but there have been some court decisions that say you can win on retaliation even if you can't show you were discriminated against. But in any event, most employment discrimination claims today, they check boxes, and they check off that box almost routinely, even in cases where they never ever complained about the discrimination that they're claiming. And so it's become just another issue that employers have to deal with. And this is your coverage summary here. 50 or more employees under Title VII of the Americans with Disabilities Act, 24 employees under the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, virtually all employers under the Equal Pay Act, and any size employer under the old Civil Rights Act, 1866. So just one slide there. All of this information can be found on the EEOC website, just so you